and stick the landing. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Nerdist Book Club. A big hello to you on the Wednesday. We are back to our regular broadcast time of Wednesdays, 5 p.m. PT. A big hello if you're watching us not only on Nerdist's YouTube page, also Nerdist's Facebook page, but Geek and Sundry's Twitch as well. Hi. Let's see the chat. If you're rolling on in, I want to hear you say a big hello. And the first thing we're going to talk about is Book Good. But who are we going to chat Book Good with? The one and only Rachel Heine from Nerdist, who's my limb. You are the I'm trying to do something. You are the gym to my will. I was going to be that, or I was going to be the little weird boy to Miss Foley, and I was like,
no, not the nephew. Although we do get another weird little boy in this section.
Yes, we do. People saying book
out
good,
of
book
context.
Good,
this sounds weird. We are reading Something Wicked This Way, Ray Bradbury, which does involve some spooky carnivals and aging backwards on a mystical carousel. So that was what that reference was. Context.
Yes, we are talking about our two protagonists, little Will Halloway and Jim Nightshade, two boys who discover this carnival. One of them is quite lured by the wicked delights of the carnival. The other one is a scared little bish who saves the day. That's who I relate to. Well, that's fair.
Very brave.
Fair. I
think he's
the
very
way
brave.
that the narrator does Will, he whines, "Oh, we shouldn't do it. No, don't, Jim." I've been listening to that for hours.
Oh, yeah, that can't help. But also, I think it is not the fear itself, but that you still do it. And every time that he needs to, even when he's a 13-year-old kid about it. The audiobook, I'm sure, will do that if you don't love the narration.
It was a little tough, but that's okay. Last week, we covered the first half of the book. This time, we are going full spoilers. I drank a beer. Sorry. Beers make me burp. So we're focusing more on the second half of the book this time. All spoilers welcome. I'm just going to read a few of these out. Lisa Hill says book good-ish. Game Wizard said book good. Jimmy Sprinkle said book good. See, Villasenor said book good. Black Belt said book good. Vaden said book good. J Bun Rock said book all right.
Stephanie Gary said book meh. It's fair.
Book meh. Stephanie says good book. David Nichols Jr. says book good. Cheetown 69 C60, of course you did, says, "Oh my God, so crazy. I just finished that today. What are the odds?" It's very, very October of all of us reading a bit of a spooky Bradbury book. Glad for you to join us. Get your thoughts in the comments as we collectively as a club talk about this book. All of it. Miss Decker Ranch says book good. Ian Powell says, there you go, book good. I tried to do it justice. Ian Powell says, book so good, being reminded of all the references in the works to this. We're going to be talking about some of those as well, which is very, very exciting. So I guess, Rachel, over to you. Book good.
Good. Book very, very good for me. If you weren't here last week, this is one of my, Ray Bradbury is one of my favorite. I have not read this book since I was in high school, college, I don't remember, even though it was last week. But I think I was thinking about it after I finished for this book that we're on right now, and I think about different types for me, because since after college, I studied English and literature, so a lot of reading and a lot of sometimes dry reading or reading necessarily have chosen for myself, etc. But even just the time, and I was fairly burnt out. after college from that and off being 20-something. But when I was a kid, I read all day, any moment that I could. I tried to get out of PE so that I could read at the dinner table and get in trouble sometimes. So all of that is to say, when I started reading again for pleasure a couple years after I finished school, I really, I read the classics and the books, and some of them I love and some of them I don't. But I'm just going to read what I'm interested in, because there was a weird kind of stigma around writing or reading genre fiction in the program that I went to school for. All of this is to say that every normally read and that I read all the time, I am looking at themes and I am looking at characters and their development, but it is characters in the plot that really are the hook for me in the books that I read now. And this is one of books that the language is why I read it. The feeling, there's a certain style of writing, definitely one that is so evocative to me as someone who doesn't really picture stuff in their mind's eye, but also as someone who has a very all over the place stream of like inner monologue. And so there's this like lush descriptiveness to it, and the rhythm in Bradbury's writing. I think that's what me to it more than I would say the books that I read now. But this was one of the books, and Bradbury was one of the writers that got me into language and like looking at syntax and all and diction and all those English things. So all of that is to say, I really enjoyed reading this again and just love the prose by Bradbury else.
I will ask, this book really does focus from two main points of views, and that is, well, actually there's a cross section, good and evil as point of views, but also children and adults. Since you read this as a child and now again as an adult, how much of your perspective has shifted, or how have you kind of taken on these themes, having grown so much in that time?
That's a question. I think I was, again, really drawn to the language, and definitely, like, as a younger person, I think felt in between both of the boy characters, Will and Jim, probably a Jim Nightshade, I would say, especially when I was younger. But I think I was really like drawn in by how spooky it was, and how it sort of had that creeping dread and wanting to know what was going to happen. Sort of, I think some of this, the over themes, obviously, of like good and evil and all of that. Like I got some sense of it, but really the concepts of mortality, obviously, as a person whose brain is fully developed, and just having unfortunately thought to myself, oh no, I understand the cliche of, oh, is youth wasted on the young? Because I was like, can you imagine if I went back in time to be in college, but I had I think it's a very relatable question. And so that to me has stuck out the most, is really like thinking about Charles as a person. I'm pretty sure I probably breezed through the monologuing in the book the first time through when he's in the, I think that kind of went over my head a little bit.
I get it. Like from our understanding of having done a book club together for years now, when you were younger, you were very much attracted to those darker topics. You almost wanted to, middle finger to the system by reading those books that challenged sort of like goodness. You wanted to, thrillers and the darker subjects were really enticing for you. What's super interesting in this one is that, yes, the language and the prose is still beautiful, but we're also championing Charles Holloway did the dad. Like, it's kind of interesting thing, like what it's like for me, where there is such a trope of the child feeling like they have to suffer or go through it on their own. Adults won't believe them. They're shunned. They're turned, oh, you're just being a silly little kid. What I loved about the second half of this book was how much Charles Holloway, the father of Will, steps up into a hero role. And I'm kind of exactly quoting what is it what Kate said earlier? There it is. Charles went from a nobody character to the full-on hero pretty quickly. It's interesting that, it looks like great plot armor where it's like, cool, the dad's in, and now, we've got a 3 in the army instead of 2. But for me, what it provided was hope. The first half of the book was incredibly, and it's the whole point of it. The carnival brings despair. And there was a lot of despair that Will was feeling, that Jim was excited by, and felt a little bit more like he belonged, or it dangled the perfect carrot for him, wanting to kind of like forward his life a little bit more. But for me, reading it, it was really great because it seemed quite overwhelming. You had so many different characters that had just essences of evil. And it was so fantastical that, police didn't believe and people were dying and no one seemed to care. The trope of trying to say to an adult, this is what's happening, and then being dismissed. I'm so glad it didn't happen here. I'd be really interested, and maybe, Rach, you can help me with the fact checking. How old was Ray Bradbury when he wrote this? Because it was very interesting that Charles became such a hero.
I believe he was 42.
I think the answer to everything.
He was, I looked it up, had the same thought, but he also started this as that he had written that he wanted Kelly to be in because he had seen a film of this circus, remind him of his childhood and his fascination with carnivals and all of these things. So I think he started writing this. Someone else may want to fact check me on this, but I believe he started writing it in his mid 30s, and eventually it was published. It was early 40s. So I think it makes sense that there is sense of your own realizing your own more and things like that. But I also feel like we have the benefit of having read it before, and really that he was going to be a bigger character by the end of the book. But I love the kind of breadcrumbs that the story gives as well, because you meet Charles and know that he's older, emotionally distant, that he's always in the library and he's losing himself in these worlds of fiction, which are relatable. But he is sort of in a place where he could be tempted by the carnival at this point before his son is involved. And then you have sort of the pull that Will feels wanting to be closer to him, not knowing how to, and the little moments right before the section we started this week where they start to bond and talk goodness. And I feel like Charles realizes that he has failed a little bit in a way. He's having to ask these things instead of, as a father, maybe, because he recognizes that Will and him are both readers. They're intrigued by all of these things that Charles is as well. And I think what makes interesting is he is someone who was a Jim. And when we get sort of his monologues in the library talking about goodness, and he's talking about himself, also said, here are all the places that I traveled, sort of running away from my and then all of a sudden,
oh no, there was such a great line with that. He said a line where he's like, so when I was, that is such a good, that really resonated with me.
I think if it's that I am thinking,
he was basically saying, so when I traveled the world for 3 years, or as I like to call it, running away from my life. Yeah,
exactly. Like, so it's I'll read it really quickly. So it's a couple pages long. It's a lengthy sort of, he's rambling, there's internal monologue, and again, when I was like 17, I was like, I think I just skipped. I skimmed a little bit. I was like, okay. So it says, Charles William Halloway, nothing extraordinary about me. I'm 54, which is always extraordinary to the man inside it. Lived in Chicago, survived in New York, brooded in Detroit, floundered in lots of places, arrived here late after living in libraries around the country all those years because I liked being alone, liked matching up in books on the roads. Then in the middle of all the running away, which I called travel, in my 39th year,
That's what it
your
was.
mother fixed me with one glance, been here ever since. And so that's just, I think that equates so much to everything kind of in the book, that they have to really look their fears in the face. They have to accept them. They have to look them in the eye. That the same kind of pull that Jim is feeling for magic to be older, to grow, is the same kind of pull that a younger Charles to travel, to keep running. And even the people who do fall prey to the carnival end up as like a mockery, twisted version of the person for that they don't want to see. So it's, with the mirrors, like all of the symbolism, you have to face things. And even drawing in like the clock, this is where I get really nerd, but like drawing in all the clock references too, of not only is it your heart, not only is it sort of when the witching hour begins, but also that each minute is another time that you can choose to be good. And so I think Charles is realizing, like, you don't even have to be evil to sometimes do bad, or to be neglectful, or to lose track of time, and all of a sudden your son is growing up and you haven't taught him some of this stuff already. So I went on a tangent. Sorry, I really like loved how it connects to itself. And I think, funnily enough, that sort of monologue sort of just covers all of the elements of the book and what the whole story is about, which is very hopeful.
The second half, yes.
Mm-hmm.
The carousel's a really interesting thing, using and weaponizing time, it being a lure, and it being we've seen it, used in many, many ways. It's used as a way to just diminish someone. Mr. Dark says to Will, "We put your mother on there," and she shrieked in horror at what she saw. And it's like, oh, you've just wasted her entire life. Like, you've just made sure that she's like done. So like that was a really interesting way. But then luring Jim, saying like, you're 13, but you want to be 19. We can make that happen. And trying to use that same lure on Charles, who realizes he's 52 or 54, and he's, may have wasted his life, and his life didn't really start until his late 30s. And now he's got a young son that he's struggling to connect with on that level. And so, Mr. Dark is there being like, I will count to 10. And it's like, for every second, it's like, oh, I missed that one. Maybe a bit biased, but having a librarian being the main hero. Why do you think we love Beauty and the Beast?
He's the janitor in the library, but that someone remind me, because that speaks to a different thought. Just the library. Keep going though. But also the mom, as you're saying, the threat of her aging and losing her life. She's also the symbol of youth to Charles, because she's younger than him as well. And he makes little comments of, I don't know, old me. And I think he's sad because he feels like he missed his life, and he's missing his life because he's sad he's missed his life. He's doing it's sort of, he's sort of sinking in it. And the way he describes good and evil, I think too, in throughout the book, and how the book kind of views it, is that it's you can make another decision, but you can't just get caught up in regret, because
you stop living your
feeds
life.
More. Yeah.
But it begs the question though, and this is for everyone: the carousel's in front of you. You can spin it forwards or you could spin it back, knowing that whatever your mindset and your wisdom and where your brain is at right now pertains. What would you spin it, and for how many turns? Give me back. I would love to do high school again with this brain, with this wisdom. Oh my god, I would deflect it so much.
Yeah, I would do college again. Well, when I was younger, like 13-ish, which is around when I read it for the first time, I would have been a Jim. I would have been make me 18 because I wanted to get out. Now I think if you had asked me a couple years ago, I've been like, yeah, I want to do college again. Although I'm still tempting just to like get a different degree. Not that I don't love my English degree, but like it would be fun. It would be that and also advantage of those things. But I think my real answer is maybe 3 years because I feel the pandemic has aged all of us in a way that I don't care about. Like,
I would love
just
those
2019.
back.
Yeah, that's
fun.
A little careful, but not too not
If I could go from 20 again, just knowing what I know now. Unstoppable. So we'll see. And I'd be able to, there's still some key regrets of my 20s that I wouldn't do.
Yeah, I do honestly agree with Miss Necromancer. And this reminded me, either if you've read the book or watching the current show or read the book with us 20 years ago, it reminded me of Claudia in Interview with the Vampire a little bit.
Oh, yes.
Immortal, but she's trapped in a younger body. Don't get enough examples in this book about how this is probably not for your own sanity or life, but it really just never being able to age and growing older. But yeah, if I had witnessed everything that just happened in the book, I don't know if I'd even step on it. I would be like, let's like throw something at the control box. I'd be like, Jim, don't you dare step on that. I don't trust you.
Yeah, 20-year-old Maude walks out. Yeah. Well, that would be mature. I would be mature. I don't know. I sometimes think I look better now than I do in my 20s. So yay for that. Other people saying I would go back. No more high school for me. Once was enough, says Frito. Yeah, I don't know if I'd do high school again. But I did get an A- on a history essay, which I'd like to relive that moment. That felt good. The Vaden says here, I wouldn't go on the carousel. As Charles explains, once you used it, you'll always want to continue to abuse it. You cannot sip from the fountain of youth. Mm-hmm.
Also, what if someone just like kicks it a little faster and then you're all of a sudden you're a baby?
That's the thing. There's so much that
don't
you're
know
not
that someone's not coming out still.
Interesting though. Some people are like, absolutely not. Everyone else is like, couple of years, maybe decade. That sounds nice. That's fair. Let's chat a little bit about Miss Foley. Do you think Miss Foley went on the carousel, or did she return to the mirror maze to go after her younger self? Do you think that little girl was Miss Foley? Yes.
I think that it's mostly clear that she is herself, but the way I remembered it from when I was younger, and that I think you could potentially read it, because she's saying like, also I have to read the lines again, but I thought it was possible when she was in the mirror, she sort of, not only did she see herself, she almost wanted to like go and rescue.
Yes.
It was reflecting her own fears
almost killed her.
Of her. Yeah. So I took it as not necessarily like the carousel obviously ages you backwards and forwards. The mirror shows you obviously your fears, your worst parts of yourself, whatever. So I kind of saw it as like her going back and to rescue. And then maybe they got swapped. But that also, I think.
That's interesting. Yeah. So the little girl did get freed, but it sucked in Miss Foley as she is now. So it was an exchange. That's really interesting. What does everyone else think? Everyone's still stuck on the carousel. That's yeah. I get it. The second half of the book mainly centers around the fact that Mr. Dark is looking for Jim and Will. There is a Will hunt, in a sense, not a witch hunt. Well, the witch is hunting. Anyway, what I found really disturbing was Mr. Dark, being the tattooed man, has the tattoos of Jim and Will on the hands, and anything that he's got tattooed, if he pinches it, he can hurt them. What a morbid thing to go up to this father and say, have you seen these kids? I got them tattooed on my hands. And Charles was just like keeping it kind of goodwill hunting. Nice. That was a good one. Charles kind of keeping it straight and narrow, but like what a freaky thing to do.
That
Do
to
you
me
think
also
that
shows that
horoscope-
Oh, sorry. I was going to say that to me showed that
Yeah.
they're already in Mr. Dark's hooks, both of them, because Will is in them too, because he's going to follow Jim, and that's how he has them now. My read of that.
Yeah, I like that a lot actually, because it is a sense of control. He can control, he's absorbed. My question for this is, do you think horror, a big trope is that there has to be some sort of hunt, chase, you running away, being chased by?
I don't think so. I think it's obviously a very common one, but I think I would more say like a sense of like the unknown, which sort of speaks to the of the carnival as Charles describes it, of death. We don't know what it is because maybe it's oblivion and don't know what that is. It's nothing. How are you afraid of that? Overall horror and like fear is around like the unknown, more a chase necessarily being necessary, but it is an effect.
Yeah, it gets me scared. Especially when they go up to Charles and he's like, you know, their names are Jim and Will. I know their names. What's your name? And he says the truth. And I'm like, what are you doing? You lied about the kids' names, but now you're saying who you are, last name, and where you work. But I realize now that he's trying to control the situation a little bit more. So he did that to control that situation. So he knew where the target was for that night and he can kind of handle it in that particular way. What do you think about, I guess, the turn of Charles? We were talking about it a little bit earlier, how, you know, he's gone from sort of being a bit of a nothing character to having such a pivotal role and being the hero of the second half of this book. But what was it like for you to go from the point of view of the children being helpless, like kind of wrapped in despair, to having that hope, and for it to do a bit of a 180?
Well, I'll throw the question to you first.
I liked it. I actually liked it a lot. I don't like those horrors where it almost is like a suffocating feeling that there is no hope. You're drowning in sort of like lack of belief from other people. I just thought it's quite interesting that they're not making the kids the hero, that the adult has to step in to prevail, and to save and to rescue. But then at the same time being the operative word, time is irrelevant in this. And so I almost kept thinking where it's like being a child or being an adult is just merely doing a few rounds on the carousel.
But not in your mind, I think, which is for me, the key point is, I think that is he's hearing some of the, like he's hearing the call a little bit. And I think because he has that regret, the way he sort of describes what he thinks the power of the carnival draw their power from and how they get people. And it's people who are either alone or feel alone. And I feel like in that and sort of realizing he felt that, but also that boys must have felt some of it somehow. And that he's the one with the age, with the maturity, with the agency. He's the one to help them. He's the one that can lead them down that path. And when he describes, so he thinks the carnival even started, it starts with one man and then his son and then other people. And it's just, I think that in the way the carnival with Miss Foley, when she is a little baby, the language around it and describing sort of as especially nefarious, that the carnival gets you because they change you so that you're scary to other people, so that no one will believe you and you have kind of no choice but to go back to them for. And to me, all of that sort of sounded like, I mean, you can look at it anyway, but depression or abuse or things like that, people who are crying out for help or alone, but especially under the view of like children, and sort of the darkness being how they're treated at an age know that that's wrong. And so even when they go to help, they don't know how to do that. No one believes them. All of that sort of resonated with me. And that's why I think he is like realizing as he's talking to these boys, because he feels like at the very least I have to step up. You know, he's not a terrible dad. He's just kind of phone stuff and disconnected, but it's not like he doesn't really know how to show it, how to either. So I think he's working. That's why there's that whole monologue. Like he's working through it as he's thinking and speaking. The difference is that he does have that age, been turned into a little kid like Miss Foley, so he still has autonomy, which she loses by becoming.
He was so ready to believe. He was so ready to believe, which was such a relief that it's like that burden could be shared. Kate makes a really great point here. One of the things about Charles coming to the forefront that was cool was that it added to Dark's arrogance. He thought he was on top of it all and that this nobody janitor wasn't even worth his attention. So he never paid attention, just like in the narrative. And the downfall came from a place that Dark didn't even bother to look until it was too late. He saw Charles as a roadblock to Jim and Will and nothing more. So that was really cool. I think that, belief, the turn where he was like, I believe everything you're saying, and then uses his resources, the library, to research. Now, that's always fun to me. That was always one of my favorite parts in Buffy, where they had, Giles ran the library. And they had their tomes and they would do their research because this is like dial-up days. But I really kind of loved like the fact that they had to get together and do research and learn about this thing and piece this information together. So the fact that he's like, I have done the research, this is what I've kind of deduced. And that's the fact that, Dark's been around for hundreds of years. These people, he's basically kind of like accruing freaks and turning them into this carnival. It has appeared every single October for decades here, if not longer. And basically it's run on fear. And it was kind of interesting to have that. It's gone from very nonsensical of these two hysterical boy, like one hysterical boy and one friend, running, not being believed, being chased, being hunted, to having him come in, an authoritative figure who has access to knowledge and has kind of provided and fleshed out what was a mystery for so long. He gave substance to something that was quite vague. And I really liked that as well. They were a paranormal book club. Yes, they were.
We will be as well. I also, for ever read or watched an adaptation of Stephen King's It, this little parch and the sort of evil force returning every decade or X amount of years, long enough for people not to remember, and the whole creepy carnival of
Hiding in the grates.
Oh yeah, all of that just and I think too when Charles is sort of thinking about good and evil and empathy, and he really focuses on knowing in order to care about them understand them, which I think is a very not in terms of people's gender or in terms of sort of the social construct of masculinity, and look in terms of empathy. And to me, that sort of speaks to Ray Bradbury's role and what he sort of is able to accomplish, especially with stories like The Martian Chronicles, that he is trying to peel back these layers that he views reading, he viewed the library, he viewed books as a way to understand other people, as a way to escape and travel, building empathy. And the way he writes is with such empathy. So I feel like the library itself and sort of the knowledge and the power really send them on this full arc and end of the book trajectory. It's like the power of in good and evil. So of that.
In the notes here, you make a really great point about who the carnival prey on. We've got Miss Foley, who was an easier target. She was a bit aloof. She was very drawn into sort of like, nearly being drowned into the mirrors. There was a plant put in her house and she was unawares. But you make a really interesting point about why they target children. You saying it's not just about preying on those in pain or with some darkness, because they are going after kids. That thought that you had, I'll highlight it. I'd love for you to explore that.
Yeah. I was trying to get to it. Just this idea that it would be very easy if we didn't have the kids to write off that are being drawn in by this carnival, and will through even against the dwarf formerly known as the
lightning rod
sale. He empathizes for all of these freaks, as they're called, but they're also all drawn in. Like, what did happen to just what happens to them after Mr. Dark is gone? Are they just supposed to be written over? Are they able to kind of change from that? Oh, Tom Fury. Yes, Tom Fury. And so, but the fact that they choose, it makes good and evil as sort of, I think, as much and as a gray area by kids. There's no way Jim Nightshade is evil, sad, and he's young and he wants to get out of there, and he has all of this energy in him and he's tempted. But I think that's what's extra insidious about Mr. Dark, is that he's going after kids who don't know, especially depending on their parents, on their surroundings. They might not know good and evil, right and wrong as well. Not be worried about temptation because they want to get out of there. And they're preying on the most vulnerable,
the miserable, the lonely, and depressed. Pathetic.
I
that's
sang that last weekend.
Yes, but that is like a villain-esque thing to do. It is to prey on the miserable, the lonely, and depressed, because there's a sense of desperate. There is a sense, of wanting to belong. Loneliness, we experienced it all during the pandemic, and I did a lot of research into sort of what that meant, and how it's a fundamental kind of fear or need, especially in our teenage years, to feel like we belong and we're willing to change who we are to fit in, instead of vouching to be accepted for who we are. And I think that's really interesting. Being miserable and depressed, holy shit. Do we look for an out? Do we look for like an easy solution or a fix? Because feeling depression and feeling miserable, there's very little worse than that. And so that's why addicts, you can form addictions, because you literally want to suppress and not feel those thoughts. And so I don't see it as a weakness. I do see it as a coping mechanism. I think that some people, like, the capacity to feel that deeply can be incredibly frightening. And as long as if it starts hurting yourself, if it starts hurting others, there's massive problems. But to prey on those who are depressed and miserable that's the evil part of it, I think. And this is why the solution to that is compassion, love, laughter, fun, happiness. And that's
facing,
literally
facing it instead of escapism. But also they're offering something tantal. All of the different sort of films and shows cater to different people, to different audiences. It seems like they have to choose of their own volition. He's not going to force Jim to actually get on the carousel, on the music, and play it forward to lure him in. And so it's preying on not only your loneliness, your pain, etc., but it's offering a solution that isn't a solution. It's just making you worse. And I think but the fact that children especially, just calling Jim like, oh, he must be evil. He's, just doesn't track with anything we've read. So struggling. And you know what, Charles? I feel like he knows, like, not only have I been distant from my son, but they're right next door. They spend their time together. Like, he does at the library, but I think in a way where by the end he sort of accepted that, you can't go, but he still has that sort of like kid at
He can
heart
still
when
fix.
he's running with them.
I want to talk about the clock analogy. I didn't pick up on this, so I think it's really quite brilliant that you did. One of the quotes that you've highlighted, which I think is great, is, "It was all laid out. He could see the face, but there were no hands on this clock. He could not tell what hour of the night of life it was for himself, the boys, or the unknown town." So talk me through the symbology of these clocks. Obviously, time we've discussed, going forwards, going backwards, time being weaponized, time being a lure. But what about sort of like the clocks in this instance?
I think it's interesting that the moment where everything shifts and where Charles, he gets the information that he needs, or the context, searching all day, all of that moment when we meet him in the library, it's after the longest day of his life. He's living, but he's also feeling his age. And then Bradbury describes the materials that he's looking at. So you have another reference with Dr. Faustus, which with the devil, you have him researching, you have him researching the occult, demons, all, carnivals, all sorts of things. Bradbury describes it as sort of this literary clock because he's laid them all away so he can see everything. And so when that quote is sort of referencing not just like how it's laying out and how all of this sort of resale fits together, but even before he knows context of what's happening with Jim and Will, before they even get there, he kind of sensing his own mortality. Is Jim running out of time? Is Will needing more time? And then as soon as Dark and the witch come in, they start talking about stop that clock, dead. And it's his heart. So there's obviously that, which ties into more
The ticking,
ticking clock.
The old ticker.
But when he says talk to the witch, and then it's sort of through what's happening, we realize, she's going to slow heart down. So I think that's another element of it. And then you kind of have the at the end of the stroke of midnight, when they are about when they have defeated Mr. Out to destroy the carousel, but it brings in that term that someone brought up in the chat, the autumn people.
Tell me more about that. I don't get it.
Yeah, I think he's describing sort of people who are drawn in by the darkness, who maybe are lonely, blind to their own problem, what's really going on, because they're, and the boys being young and sort of thinking in black and white terms are like, does that make us summer people? Yeah, and it doesn't have to be necessarily bad. And no, you boys are closer, but I think I have autumn in me too. And it's not all good. It is a choice. There are shades of it. Just because Jim's being tempted doesn't make him. And there's that moment too where, as Will did, what happens to people who are drawn in, because it's that's good. That's a good point too. I did not pick up. But Miss I want to say Miss Flo, but
Foley.
Miss Fossey, or Foley. But Will is like, what happens to them, or do we need to worry about them? And Charles, sort of, not those ones. I don't think we need to worry about them, but there are others out there they wear.
Yeah.
And the boys look at themselves and they like, are we going to be the autumn people? Because they have seen some.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was some of the symbology that I saw.
I
And
like
also
that.
some of them are like auto marionette or robots instead of, which is more explored in the Illustrated Man short stories by Bradbury.
I don't like that shit. I have a mini TED talk on how I can derive this book written in the 1960s, sort of set in the 20s to 50s. It's a little bit ambiguous, and how what sustains, fuels, and the reason for the carnival is actually today's like modern day troll. So when someone who feeds on despair, misery, pain, who feels unloved and hasn't got laughter or the cure for it, in this case, you know, with Charles, who's realizing that love, comfort, hugs, care, compassion is actually going to help this. But when you are filled with that despair and misery, you go online and you write shit to people. You pick them apart. You make them feel awful about themselves, because that in a way makes you feel a little bit better. And when you cause pain and misery and upset and ridicule, there's a sense where you feel like you belong a little bit more, or that you feel a little bit better about yourself, and you are spreading that misery because you cannot heal yourself. So trolls are literally running the modern day carnival. And that's kind of like, that's my TED talk about what I was reading. There was a quote in particular of how he was describing it. Here we are. Charles Holloway's explanation of how the carnival works is a critique of the way that people act towards each other. He explains that it's pain and suffering that people cause each other in their everyday lives that Mr. Dark and his kind take advantage of. They are not the cause of evil in humanity. They simply use evil to perpetuate greater evils. The carnival would not survive if people did not harm each other so much all the time. He describes how people who are unhappy often take solace in making others unhappy too. And the carnival is exactly the same, except that its members are never happy and they want to make others suffer in order to provide themselves with pleasure. We are living on the goddamn carnival. I would like 20 years back if that's the case.
I know. Well, we also have sort of in the, I think, plenty of marginalized communities can tell you that trolling has been around a long time. It's been vicious a long time, and in previous, I think in earlier years, there was this sort of mentality of, oh, it's just online, and now you have corporations, you have politicians, you have bajillionaires, you have terrorists, you have all sorts of all of these. Actually, I won't say evil because that lets people off the hook. But these really powerful figures or institutions adopting trolling as a way to gain power or themselves.
Well, you know that it's like,
I think that's the huge step trolling, but it's now like internet culture and trolling actions and all of bullying and all that being amplified and now being used by much big, way more powerful entities, I think is another kind of like way of looking at just how exponential, like there are a lot of people who are more depressed, and it being subjected to the toxicity or negativity, not just if you're in online space, it has permeated so much of our culture. I think that's, I don't know where I'm going except to be sad about it.
It's a sad place. Sad world.
make such use of 6 Ed World. Ooh, next time a dark carnival comes to town. But you make a valid point.
It's interesting because, like, scientifically, statistically, outrage, negativity, shock, accusation, discrimination spreads something like 6 to 10 times faster than positivity, celebration, compassion, good, altruism.
Because of
but it's interesting.
they're built to view that as the engagement and to fuel it, and so it becomes a, it's their strategy for making money is to triple,
And we're
quadruple
all
down
falling
on all
for
of
it by
that. I know.
retweeting, spreading, harnessing.
Don't
And it's this
if you
outrage. I
hate
can't
something,
believe this
don't
is
amplify it.
happening.
Yeah.
Because you're literally spreading the message. Even if you say, I don't condone this, this is awful, you are still spreading their message. Anyway, yeah, but I to kind of go on Kate's point, it's interesting to see how trolling is evolving. And I kind of have this theory where even if you think you're fighting the good fight by calling someone out or taking a stance against a movement, whatever it is, if you aren't doing that with compassion and kindness, you are a part of the problem. I think it's like people truly believe that they're not in the wrong and they're doing something right by literally harassing and bullying those that they think are in the wrong. But it's like,
yeah, unless you're surely advocating for or hate someone directly because of who they are, where they're from, etc., like, then I think that's different than, like, maybe someone doesn't know something. I'm talking about, like, actual hateful, like,
well,
I don't need to be nice to not, because that won't happen for me. That's never gonna happen.
I get that, but I just think it's so interesting where someone's like, this person was so awful.
Oh,
so
totally.
I'm going to tweet 500 times to everyone they've ever met and their children and in my feed to say violently vicious, awful things because they're so bad. And I'm like, but the stuff that's coming out of your mouth is horrific. How is that?
Oh, yeah. I don't. And I think there's a lack of nuance also. To me, I think I would want to give people the opportunity to learn, to listen. If there is not a good faith argument happening, if someone is advocating or saying hate speech or threatening people or anything like that, like, for me personally,
you're done.
But I do think we all can learn something else or someone else's, like, another lived experience or a thing. And I see what you're saying, but it's hard because you say one thing to an audience of, whoever you're talking to. Hey, Zelda. And people extrapolate, a one thing to assume X, Y.
Yes.
Consider the medium.
Yeah, that's not the point.
Or, like, the algorithm, like, of somebody's pay. Like, maybe
no one wants to do any research. No one wants, like, we are gone. There is no Giles on the internet anymore. All the information's there, but truth is
also
really
the
hard to see.
Yes.
Because everyone's got their own version of truth and people display opinion as if it's fact. A lot of things here. We're reading out some of the scores that you gave. Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury. Thierry gives it a 2.5 out of 5. Argument being, English isn't my first language and the prose and the way that this is written is a little bit tricky for me and I'm not enjoying it as much. Ian Powell gives it a 5. Bradley gives it a 3. Colleen gives it a 5. Andre gives it a 4. Fatal Flower gives it a 4. Jimmy gives it a 3. Aaron gives it a 4. Lisa gave it a 3.5. David gave it a 5. J. Bunroll gave it a 3. Maude Garrett gave it a 3. Rachel gives it a 10.
10.
Give me 3 reasons why. Roy Chan says, where's Hector? Hector got real busy. Book club is a little bit sadder without Hector, but we are thriving, us gals doing our thing. If you're a big fan of Hector, make sure you follow him on social medias so that this doesn't become such a shock. Why do you give it a 10 out of 5?
I just think not only sort of the love that I bring and how kind of formative his work and like the darkness was for me, but just reading this, it gave me that just like I kind of forgot that love of reading a little bit and really like putting on my English nerdism hat. And so I think it was just really for me to revisit it and see it like through a different lens and still really love the prose so much.
Out of all of the themes and symbols here, which one was your favorite to dissect and to have in the book?
Probably I mean, I think all of what I talked about can sort of be distilled to Charles, everything Charles is talking about in the library, and then we see it play out in different ways right out from there. But I think me being probably not much wiser and revisiting like all of that sort of so many little bits there that I wanted to like think about like where we've seen those words before, how does it all connect together? So it got my brain going a little bit.
My favorite was the witch became the scariest thing in the first half of the book, but the way that it was described in the second half, where he opens his eyes, like literally slowly dying, and realizes she's just tickling him.
I know.
And he's like, "Are you kidding me?" She's like, "What?" She's tickling me.
In like a like deflated balloon, like giant balloon, just like.
Yeah. Thanks to Will giving that one the old whoop whoop. So that one was a lot of fun. But you know what? It's only October. We need a book for November. Sometimes we'll do a poll. There was a question earlier through Facebook that was, I'm scrolling. One moment, please.
Way a while ago.
The context.
It was
a while ago.
It was basically asking this is for choosing books, which is sort of a grab bag. We take recommendations, but we take recommendations sometimes poll. Sometimes we'll do kind of a theme month with a poll. Sometimes it'll be Maude's pick. Sometimes it'll be mine. And this time we both picked.
Oh, we did. I gave you a little bit of a short list. Yes.
No, that's fine, because I picked this one.
About a year ago, someone brought this to my attention saying it was the best book they ever read. I love asking that question. What is the best book you've ever read? Because it's like, it's just, chances are it's going to be outstanding, right? Unless people do have very varying opinions. But this has been on my to read list for a while. I gave you a few books and you were like, oh, I really wanted to read this one as well. In 2015, it won the Hugo Award for Best Written Book. It's the science fiction novel, The Three-Body Problem by Chinese author Liu Cixin. Now, it's book 1 of the Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy. And a little bit about this book to get you psyched if you haven't heard it. The series portrays a fictional past, present, and future where in the first book, Earth encounters an alien civilization in a nearby star system that consists of 3 solar-type stars orbiting each other in an unstable 3-body system. Both George R.R. Martin and Barack Obama publicly endorsed this book. So we are going to read from chapters 1 to 16. Stop when you get to 17. What do you know about this book, Rach? We haven't done sci-fi in a while.
Yeah, I've heard this being referenced by other authors, by people who have said it's most kind of imaginative science fiction. And yeah, it's just I think it's like, it's been on my to read list maybe buried. So when you sent it to me, I was like, oh, I added that to my list so long ago. Like, yes, let's do it. Oh, Netflix is also adapting the book. Exciting.
Yes, they've already cast for it, and it's going to be coming out, I believe, next year.
Cool.
But yeah.
Well, maybe we'll have to read the second one if we like it.
Yeah, if we like it. So there you go. 1 to 16. Let's read that. Our next show, though, is going to be November 23rd. So you've got quite a bit of time to get reading for that one, because November is a much longer month with quite a few Wednesdays in it. So 23rd of November, pop it in the calendar. That's when we're going to be doing part 1. Part 2 will be on the 30th of November. If you've got Thanksgiving's plans, totally understand. If you hate your family, stop on by, because we're your family now. And right now, because it is the last, it's the second every. No, we're your family. It could be, actually. I felt nice. We're your family now. Come in for a hug. We love everyone here. Because it is part 2, we do. Because it's part 2, we're going to head over to Geek Bomb's Discord right now. We do a little after show to celebrate the book when we finish it. Now, this show is not recorded at all. If you're there, you make it, you get access, you're in part of the chat. If you miss it, there's no way to find it. It's not a VOD. It's be there or be square. So if you want to get there, sign up to any of Geek Bomb's tiers. It starts at $5 a month. You can get access to the book club voice channel, which also gives you access in 2 different shows, 4 hours of live content. We can talk about a second book at the beginning of the month if you love your books. It also has a 24/7 reading channel where we talk books the entire time. We're going to head over there now. If you do want to get involved, patreon.com/geekbomb. But yeah, if not, we'll see you on the 23rd of November. Thank you so much for joining us right here. Rachel, it's been a pleasure.
I'll talk to you soon.
The notes were amazing. You really did a good job with this. It's like you like the book.
Thanks.
All right, bye everyone.
Weird.